What is up, my fellow Mythos files? Today, we're going to be talking about the feather of Simurgh. Now, this artifact comes from the fantastic world of fables, and it is an item that, when held by anyone, will grant them the ability to understand and speak any language known to man. It is an amazing gift, and one that would be very useful for a lot of people around the world. But like most magic items in fiction, there's always a catch. And in the case of the feather of Simurgh, well, let's just say that its abilities are a bit more complicated than meets the eye. Now, before we get started, I do want to remind you all to please like and subscribe. If you enjoy what I do here, if you enjoy these videos that I put together, there's so many of you out there who watch but aren't subscribed. So if you could just take a moment to help me out here, I would greatly appreciate it. Now, without further ado, let's get into the details of today's video. The Simurgh is a mythical creature out of Persian mythology. In fact, I did a previous video on them back in September of 2020. And although they are often depicted as being peacock-like creatures, that wasn't actually how they were originally described. Instead, they are described as giant birds, some even saying that they are the biggest bird that ever existed. They are known as being one of the most benevolent creatures in Persian mythology. They are extremely wise and often have been used as a symbol of the soul or the spirit. There are actually 3 different types of Simurgh, the first 2 being good and 1 being evil. The bad one being called the Akman. They are said to cause chaos and destruction and can bring about floods and earthquakes. Then you have your standard Simurgh, which is kind of like their base form. These are said to be extremely helpful and are often associated with royalty. They can grant wishes and are said to be incredibly wise, also helping those who are seeking wisdom. And then finally, you have the white Simurgh. White Simurghs are said to only appear once every 1,000 years, and when they do, they are said to bring great fortune and happiness. So now that we know a little bit more about the Simurgh themselves, let's talk about their feathers. As mentioned earlier, the Simurgh is a giant bird, so obviously they drop a lot of feathers. Now, the feathers of a normal Simurgh would be incredibly powerful, but they aren't quite as strong as the feathers that come from the white Simurgh. You see, white Simurgh feathers are said to have incredible magical properties. Not only can they grant the user good luck, but they can also heal any injury. This includes curing illnesses, restoring health, and even bringing the dead back to life. That's a pretty cool power and definitely something that would be very useful to have around. But once again, there's always a catch. You see, in order to obtain one of these feathers, you need to perform a near impossible task. You must fly up to the sun and pluck out one of its rays. Now, as you can imagine, this is a very difficult task, but not completely impossible. In fact, there is a story where someone was able to accomplish this feat. The hero of the story went up to the sun and told it that he wanted to be given a feather from the sun, and so the sun granted his wish and gave him one of its rays, which turned into a white Simurgh feather. Now that our hero had the feather, he went back down to earth and gifted it to the king. Now, the king was overjoyed to receive such a powerful gift, but soon realized that he didn't actually know how to use it. You see, the feather was very volatile and unpredictable. If he wanted to use its healing powers, he would have to sacrifice something of equal value, and since he wasn't willing to do that, the feather remained unused. After the king passed away, his son took over the throne, and he too wanted to use the feather for his own selfish reasons. He wanted to become immortal, but when he tried to use the feather, it backfired on him, and he ended up dying instead. After this, the feather was lost and never seen again. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. What does this have to do with the whisper of the gods and the feather of Well, the feather of Simurgh is basically the same thing. It's a white Simurgh feather that has fallen to earth and has been discovered by humans. And just like the feather in the story, it is incredibly volatile and dangerous. You see, the feather doesn't just give you the ability to speak and understand any language. It also gives you the ability to influence people's minds. You can convince them to do anything you want, even if it goes against their own morals and beliefs. Basically, you have the ability to control people. Now, that's a pretty powerful ability, and one that would be very tempting to use, especially if you're not a good person. In fact, that's exactly what happened to one of the main characters in the comic. He found the feather and used it for his own selfish reasons, controlling people and manipulating them into doing what he wanted. However, the feather eventually took control of him and turned him into a mindless puppet. Eventually, he was defeated and the feather was taken away from him. Now, I know I keep saying that the feather is volatile and dangerous, but it really can't be fully unleashed until the comic gets to its climax. There is still a lot of build-up and mystery surrounding the feather, and we don't really get to see its full power until the end. But trust me, when we do, it's pretty mind-blowing. Basically, the feather is a literal representation of the voice of God. When you hold it, you are basically channeling the power of the divine and can influence reality itself. Now that's a pretty awesome power, and one that I think would be pretty fun to play with. But once again, there's always a catch. You see, when you use the feather, you are slowly being corrupted by its power. The longer you hold on to it, the more control it has over you. Eventually, it completely takes over and turns you into a shell of your former self. Basically, the feather is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it grants you incredible power and abilities, but on the other hand, it slowly corrupts you and twists you into something evil. Now that's a pretty dark and serious note to end on, but it really is the only way to go. The feather is a symbol of faith and belief. And what better way to show that than to have it corrupt and destroy the very thing it represents? It's a pretty sad and ironic ending, but it's also pretty realistic. Humans are inherently selfish and greedy, and the feather knows this. It knows that if it were to just give out its powers to anyone, they would use it for evil. So it tests them. It tries to corrupt them and turn them into something evil, because it knows that that's what they're capable of. And in the end, that's what happens. The main character succumbs to the feather's power and becomes the very thing it was trying to defeat. Now, that's a pretty messed up ending, but it's also pretty brilliant. The author really knows how to keep you on your toes and never really lets you get comfortable. If you thought you had everything figured out, if you thought you knew what was going to happen, well, guess again, because the author always has a way of surprising you. And that's what makes Fables one of the best comics ever written. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, if you want to watch more of my videos, you can do so here. So until next time, my fellow Mythos Files, stay safe, stay informed, and most importantly, stay curious.